Frankie knew that Bob was a mechanic and that he examined the bikes before the big race. So he said he and his friend Monty were going to visit your dad. They were going to force him to sabotage the favorite's bike. Dad must have refused, and that's when he and Frankie started arguing, said Jack. Of course, that must have been it. Sidney told Jack how angry Frankie had been when he had arrived home that day after visiting Bob. He was drunk. He was like a madman. He had to take his anger out on someone, and he took it out on me, said Sidney, his voice trembling. I'd better go, said Jack, embarrassed. Don't you want to know what he and that Monty did to me? Sidney asked, very upset. I don't think that I want to know, Jack said in a quiet voice. I'd better go home now. Frankie Lewis is a monster, Sidney screamed as Jack was leaving the room. He made me into an invalid. He did this to his own brother. He might have murdered your dad. You don't know, do you? He could do something like that and not care. He's a cruel monster. Jack left the house quickly. Sidney was still screaming. Jack could hear him as he walked down the street. Chapter 13. Finding the Evidence. When he arrived home, Jack told Susan everything that Sidney had told him. How terrible! That poor man, exclaimed Susan. Jack thought for a moment. Well, now we know that Frankie had a motive, he said. A motive? Asked Susan. You're the lawyer in the family, answered Jack. Don't you understand? Frankie had a good reason for wanting Dad dead. Dad wouldn't do what Frankie wanted.